The misfortune happening in the world right now is instability of the US market. This year, when Donald Trump came to office, Donald Trump decided to use the US government to mingle in the financial market. And so investors and central governments around the world are now moving away from investing in the US financial market and buying gold. That is why the price of gold have gone up by 70% this year alone. And Ghana positioned itself to take advantage of this misfortune. Dr. Ato Forson, the finance minister of Ghana, presented the budget for 2026 before the Parliament of Ghana yesterday, November 13th, 2025. And in the budget reading, he credited luck for being the reason for Ghana's economic recovery in 2025. Of course, he didn't use the word luck, but that is what I deduced from him saying that cocoa and gold have been big drivers of Ghana's economic recovery in 2025. And I would explain what I mean by that in a bit. But I'll preface it by saying luck is opportunity meeting preparation. So luck doesn't mean that the government didn't do anything. The government saw an opportunity and took the right steps to take advantage of the opportunity. I will explain all this in a bit. My name is Tenebi Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer who lives in the US. On this channel, I talk about geopolitics from the perspective of an African. So what I'm going to talk about today is focus on the global events that contributed to Ghana's economic boom in 2025 and why the finance minister agrees with me. Let's get right into it. The reason I'm saying agrees with me is because I've done 2 or 3 different videos in the past explaining that the government alone cannot be credited for Ghana's economic boom in 2025. And I've done a video on the cocoa aspect, on the gold aspect, on different things. So what I'm going to do in this video is break down, give a little summary of what is happening in the cocoa industry in the world in 2025, and then give a summary on what is happening in the gold industry in 2025, and then praise the government for how they are taking advantage of it. Let's start with the cocoa. If you didn't know, the price of cocoa went up globally from $3,000 per ton in the end of 2023 to $12,000 per ton by the end of 2024. 4 times the increase in price just in the space of about 16 months. And here is the reason for the increase. You know, in economics, we are taught that market forces drive price. So demand and supply are the market forces that drive price. So the supply, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and Cameroon together produce over 2/3 of all the cocoa used in the world. That means that what happens in these 4 countries affects the chocolate supply chain in the entire world. And I say chocolate, even though cocoa is used for more than just making chocolate. It's used in creams, plenty different things, right? And what happened is production of cocoa have been going down and down in the last 2 seasons. So if you are a news watcher in Ghana, you know that galamsey have been fingered as the reason why cocoa production is going down in Ghana. But galamsey is not the only reason cocoa production is going down in Ghana. There is the shifting weather patterns. Yes, climate change is real. And so there's also the aging tree stock. So cocoa is a perennial crop, which means that the trees live for years or ages. But you know, just like all living things, their shock make weak, almost shock year weak with time, right? And so cocoa trees, the older they get, the less and less they are able to, you know, produce. And the number of farmers in the world is going down, not just in Ghana. And so new cocoa trees being planted in Ghana is going down. That means that production is going down, not just in Ghana, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and Cameroon, right? What that means is that the supply of cocoa is down globally. And because it is a free market, that means that demand is what? Up. So the demand is up, supply is down. That is why you would have a 400% increase in a matter of just over 12 months, right? And this year alone, the price of cocoa is somewhere around 6,000. The market forces are stabilizing, but it's still high, right? And it is projected that it will get even higher because it is projected that in 2026, the production of cocoa in these 4 countries will go down by 10%, which means that demand will still be exceeding supply, which means that price will still go high. And so that is the market price of cocoa in the world, right? The market conditions means that Ghana is making more money from the small cocoa we are growing, even though we are growing smaller than we used to before. We used to have 1 million metric tons of cocoa produced in a year. Now we are in about 600,000. I think it's going up to about 700,000, but it's still less than 1 million metric tons. So supply is down, but prices are up. So we are cashing out. But what I mean by I want to praise the government for how they are taking advantage of this. So earlier this year, I did a whole video on it. The government of Ghana said they couldn't increase the price of the market gate, farm gate price of cocoa, which means that the amount of money they give to farmers, they buy cocoa from farmers, they couldn't increase it because of, they have debt to pay and all that. And, the economy of Ghana was very bad at the beginning of this year. And so I thought it was bad. I thought it was bad the way the cocoa board, chairman Randy Abe spoke about this thing. But the government changed its tune because of something, which is what I want to praise the government for. There was an election this year in Ivory Coast. And African politicians love to do giveaways during election. So the government of Ivory Coast increased the producer price of cocoa for farmers. Just 3 weeks actually. Yes, less than a month to the elections. And when that happened, the government of Ghana responded by increasing the producer price of cocoa for Ghanaian farmers within days. Why is that important? There is the issue of smuggling, where Ghanaian farmers, instead of selling to the government of Ghana, will sell to the government of Ivory Coast because the government of Ivory Coast will offer them better price than the government of Ghana. And usually, the government of Ghana have used force to get the farmers to sell to Ghana. So you arrest them for smuggling and all that. But if you arrest a cocoa farmer for smuggling and put him in jail, the cocoa farmer's children are now going to school. So they are not going to work on the farm. So it's a lose-lose situation both for the farmer and the government. So the government thought that instead of using force, we are going to use competition, free market solutions to get farmers to sell to the government of Ghana and not smuggle it. And so that is something I will praise the Mahama government for. In the beginning of the year, they had the wrong idea. And by the end of the year, in October, we are not getting to the end of the year, we're in November, they realized that we need to do better. And so they increased the price. And I want to praise the government for doing that. So now farmers will sell their cocoa to Ghana. Ghana will sell it on the world price and the money stays in Ghana. You understand what I'm saying? Good. And now let's go to gold. Gold price have also been increasing on the world market. So gold price is, dependent on a lot of factors. So there was a surge in gold price under George Bush even before the recession, when the war on terror started, because terrorists were buying gold. Every misfortune in the world is a chance for somebody to make fortune. So when terrorism was high and the war on terror was high, George Bush was, big on cracking down on money laundering because people were laundering money to terrorists. So the terrorists decided to do what? Buy gold instead. So that is what was happening, and that drove the price of gold for Ghana in the early 2000s. I'm bringing this up to make a point that misfortune usually results in fortune for someone. So the misfortune happening in the world right now is instability of the US market. So the most stable financial market in the world, even now, is the US market. So investors and countries around the world invest in US government bonds because it is very stable. Now, this year, when Donald Trump came to office, which is strange because Donald Trump is a Republican, Republicans are capitalists, capitalists hate government, but Donald Trump decided to use the US government to mingle in the financial market. Now, there are people who are saying that Trump did that to benefit his, investors. Maybe I don't buy that. I think Trump just made a bad judgment call. Usually, corruption is an easier explanation for bad decisions governments make than incompetence. I just felt like Donald Trump made a bad judgment call when it came to the issue of tariff, not the tariff itself, the way he announced the tariff. Again, I have another video on that. Because, I've been doing this for just a year, but I love talking about the economics of the world. So I churn out these videos quite often. So when Trump announced the tariff, he didn't go through the usual US government procedure to make changes in the financial market. If Trump had used the Senate and House, aka Congress, to put tariff on goods and services coming from other countries to the US, it wouldn't have had the drastic effect it had on the financial market. The way Trump did it created a lot of volatility in the financial market in the US. And so that made the US market volatile and unstable. And so investors and central governments around the world are now moving away from investing in the US financial market and buying gold. That is why the price of gold have gone up by, 70% this year alone. And Ghana, again, positioned itself to take advantage of this misfortune. With the gold board, the level of scrutiny Ghana government is putting in the gold industry, Ghana government is benefiting more from the surge than it would have done in the past. Again, I have to praise the Mahama administration for taking advantage of this misfortune to make fortune for Ghana. My only issue is I'm saying make fortune for Ghana because the money will stay in Ghana. How the government uses the money is another conversation. They can let the money stay in Ghana and pocket it. That is another conversation. When I see that happen, I will call it out. But for now, I want to praise the policies the government of Ghana is putting in place to ensure that the government of Ghana is benefiting from global trends. So we spoke about gold. Global trends means that there is high demand for gold. We are, in this case, churning out supply to meet the global demand. And so we are making money. In the case of gold, there is a global demand which was created by reduction in supply. And so, again, we are cashing out from that. You understand? It's simple economics, free market. And free markets, I keep repeating free market for a reason. NDC government or the NDC party calls themselves a social democrat party. That means that they believe in, to an extent, having socialist policies. The NDC, the NPP government or the NPP party, the leading opposition, calls themselves liberal democrats. So when it comes to economic policies, you expect that NPP will use free market policies to drive the economy of Ghana forward, and you expect that the NDC will use a mixture of free market and government interference to drive the economy of Ghana forward. Personally, the last time I voted for NPP because I've said it several times, I'm a capitalist. I like free market. But the last administration by the NPP, the Akufo-Addo administration, was a big disappointment. in terms of being a government that became the most socialist government maybe in the history of Ghana. My point is this: Akufo-Addo made promises that he was going to use the private sector to grow the economy of Ghana. He did not. The NDC, which is supposed to be a social democrat party, now have found ways to use the private sector to drive the economy of Ghana. How? By letting the free market dictate how they move. Simple. I just wanted to highlight that from the budget, I'll still make more videos on the budget because it's a long document. If I'm reading it, I'm still reading it. If I'm reading it and I see something that catches my attention and I have some thoughts on it, I'll make another video. So subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of budget related videos. Thank you for watching. Talk to you later.